Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Henning, and I will be serving as the moderator for this session. Just a few housekeeping items. Before we get started, if you haven't already, please go to the top right-hand corner of your screen where it says View and select Speaker to enable the speaker mode for this presentation. This will give you the best view of the presentation today. We have a total of about 45 minutes together. The presentation will run 30 to 35 minutes, which leaves about 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. And I'll give a 2-minute warning before we begin the Q&A portion of the session. So as you go along, you might want to type questions in the chat box or take notes and then type them in the chat box so that we can have a nice interaction with Miriam near the end of the session. As you listen to the presenter, please, well, I said that, this session is being recorded. If you do not wish to be seen, please just turn off your camera. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our presenter, Dr. Miriam J. Singer. Dr. Singer is the Associate Director for the School of Education at Farley Dickinson University and brings us the presentation titled Using Data for Program Improvement and Candidate Success, a Year Later and More Data. Miriam, it's all yours.
Thank you. I first want to thank Amy Klein and the entire committee for permitting me to do my presentation today, and of course to John Henning for moderating this session. I'll try to move through this. I have quite a bit of data coming up, and I know that the tables themselves are small, but I will go over some of that with you. So let's move forward. I'm trying to, okay, they've got it down at the bottom. Okay, so we're going to follow the path to student success, and I have to tell you that there are 3 routes in our program. Our first route is our 5-year BA MAT program. We call it the QUEST program. Those students come in, finish their bachelor's degree in 4 years, begin their graduate studies in their junior year, carrying 15 credits that serve dually both for their BA and then moving forward into their 36 credit MAT in the 5th year. Those students are required to take the core battery by the time they hit 60 credits, maintain a GPA of 3.0 or better throughout the entire program, and pass the Praxis 2 before they're permitted to student teach. Our traditional MAT candidates, we ask to provide all the required documentation right up front before they're fully matriculated into our program. That includes the core battery, the 3.0 GPA on their undergraduate, and the Praxis 2 exam. They should have had all of those conditions met. Occasionally, we admit somebody on a 9-credit provisional program, and they cannot go further than that. And that's because we want to make sure that our students, our candidates are successful and have the ability. Then we have our alternate route candidates. And I'd like to point out something that's unique with alternate routers right now, and that is they have to hold, for us, a CE, and they have to hold a head teaching position. But the state will issue a CE, and they are able to obtain with that CE teaching positions, even if they have not taken, passed the core, or had their Praxis 2. So part of the deal is making sure that they know right up front that they're going to have to comply with those requirements. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay. So we track a lot of data in our program. One of the things we track are the people, and besides the candidates, we track faculty. We want to know who our field supervisors are, both for early field experiences and then for CP1 and for CP2. We try to maintain consistency with field supervisor to candidate so that that field supervisor can see growth across the program, and that was very much alluded to in terms of dispositions in the plenary session. So we do that. But we also look at those field supervisors, and we want to make sure that they are not consistently scoring candidates as perfect, particularly in earlier clinical experiences and in CP1. We want to make sure that there is growth for our candidates because nobody starts out perfect and probably nobody really ends up perfect. We're also very concerned because a lot of our field supervisors are retired, and some of them do not want to go into the schools. Now, we've given some leeway for the past couple of years, but moving forward, we really need to get our field supervisors back in the school, observing our students, our candidates in person, and we want to make sure that's possible. Okay. The next piece I want to just look at for a moment is that, did I skip one? Did I lose something? Nope. Okay. I lost. Okay. I lost a slide somewhere, but we'll find it. It'll show up. Okay. We want to talk about being proactive throughout our entire, let me just see if I'm missing, if I got a slide out of order. Oh, lovely. Okay. One of my slides disappeared, so I'll just give you the bottom line. I think I alluded already that the core battery has to be passed by the time a Quest student has 60 credits. For our MAT students, that has to be passed coming into the program, the same for our alternate route programs. And we've added an additional piece of information for those students, and that is they cannot begin CP1, clinical practice 1, unless they fully passed the core, unless they fully passed praxis 2, or in the case of elementary students, they have to have passed 3 out of the 4 elementary praxis 2 exams and come within 5 points of the 4th exam. And we're going to show you why in a moment. We'll show you some data on that. So that's a very interesting piece of information. The elementary praxis, we ask those students to take that exam, part of it in their junior year, finish it up in their senior year. The secondary, we ask them to take praxis 2 within the senior year when they've had about 2/3 of their content courses. Okay, so let's go on to being proactive. We have developed a program-wide template for developing a lesson plan. It is used in all pedagogy classes throughout the program. It is used in developing lesson plans for their EdTPA. And we have added into that lesson plan issues such as, what is your central focus? What language functions are you addressing? What language supports are you being asked? And what theoretical principles are you using to back what you're doing? We're also making sure that when the students submit their assessments for their lessons, that they have actionable feedback, because that is what EdTPA looks for. Actionable assessment, actionable feedback. We're also very proactive that when we put our students into CP1, one of the first things that we do is we start with the glossary in the back of the handbook. Okay, because otherwise we're all on different vocabularies. John, I just want to ask you, there are several questions in the chat or comments in the chat. Should we stop for them for a moment or should we move forward?
You're fine, Miriam. You're fine.
We'll go? Okay. All right.
Yeah, I think this question was answered, Miriam, of why the supervisors don't go into the school.
Yeah, the schools don't want them right now, and some of the supervisors are still very wary of the COVID issues. Okay. Another piece of being proactive, okay, is using clinical practice 1 as a vehicle to do trial runs. What does that mean? The assignments for the seminars that accompany CP1 are exactly what's being asked on the EdTPA. So students are asked to provide, to come up with a mini unit. They are asked to answer, to respond in writing to most of the prompts, not all of them. And this material is not being used for the EdTPA, but it's being used so that the professor for the clinical one, the clinical practice one, can give feedback, can give appropriate feedback, can help candidates to see what is missing. We think this is incredibly important. And we also asked the students at that time to record themselves teaching and to analyze themselves. The feedback from our candidates on recording themselves for the first time is a real eye-opener for everyone. Do I really sound like that? Do I roll my eyes? Do I scowl when I teach? Do I only look to one side of the room? Did I repeat a child's question in case it couldn't be heard in the back of the classroom? Did I give sufficient wait time? So the practice during CP1 is really important, and I'm going to show you how our candidates have grown with this. It has really helped our candidates to move forward. Our CP1 seminars are mixed, everything from early childhood to elementary to ESL to secondary in all subject areas. So another positive to that is that our candidates have a chance to feed off of each other and to offer suggestions and help to each other. We did find a missing component, and that is specific to the elementary candidates who have a task 4 in elementary math. There is no trial run on that in CP1. And that's really important because this is one of the weaker areas for our candidates, or it has been. So we're planning a fix for it. And in our elementary math pedagogy class, one of the requirements is 10 hours of tutoring and a write-up about the tutoring, about how they assess their students, what they did each time they met during the 10 hours with their student, and a post-test to see where the student they tutored has improved. Well, that aligns perfectly with task 4 for the elementary math. And so we are coming fall to change the tutoring assignment slightly to be a trial run for the task 4. And we think that will help. First of all, it will give our candidates a better direction on how to write up their tutoring. But we also think that it will help the candidates very much to be able to understand what they need to do that task 4. So let's see if I can find that little button that's almost invisible at the bottom, and we'll move forward. Now I'm going to show you some of our data. Some of it is very nice, some of it not so nice. And what I'm going to show you is the not so nice. So the core reading, as you know, needs a 156 to pass, the writing a 162, and the math a 150. Let's look and see where some of our candidates are holding. This data here are students who right now have earned 60 or more credits. And just for the record, there are about 96 students in this entire sample, 96 candidates. And so if you look, these 9 candidates come out to about 8% of our candidates have not yet passed the core, and they're going to be moving into their junior year, which means we can't let them move past the 60 credits. Now, some of them are not so terrible. Candidate number 2, as an example, is 2 points away from passing the writing. She only has to repeat it. The same thing with candidate number 9 down at the bottom. But candidate number 3 on this list has a math score on the core of 116. That is frightening to us. And so we have arranged some possibilities for tutoring for her. And I'm going to show you the same thing for candidate number 6, down at 128. Okay. We've broken it down, and I'm going to show you what we're going to do with these candidates in a moment. I'm going to come back to them. Okay. The next piece is we're going to take a quick look at some of the Praxis 2 data. And the Praxis 2 data, this is only for the elementary because the secondary is all over the place. But let's take a look at that data. These are students who hope to be in CP1 in the fall. And we have about half of our juniors and seniors are in elementary. These 13 students, these 13 candidates represent half of our elementary candidates who plan to be in CP1 in the fall. That's a good number who have not yet passed everything. Some of them because they haven't taken everything, like candidate number 8. And some of them because, and I've highlighted the scores that are very low. Most of them are approaching, but on candidate number 2, the social studies is quite low. They need a 159 to pass that. On candidate number 3, they need a 159 to pass social studies. On candidate number 5, the math is frightening to us. And on candidate number 11, look how nice and high the math is, but not the reading. So we're concerned about these candidates. Just for point of information, this year we had 3 students who were delayed in their student teaching, 2 in elementary and 1 in secondary for CP2. They could not progress past CP1. And we had two candidates who could not even begin with CP1, and they are still not there. We had a very large number of student teachers for us this particular year. We had 77 student teachers who are right now finishing up their CP2. We have additional 6 state alternate route who are in their first semester, in their final semester, and another 4 state alternate route who are in their 3rd out of their 4th semester. So all of these fit in, okay? I am anticipating that of this group of students, we're going to have a problem with 4 people based on prior experience. So let's see what we do to support these people. The first is our first prong. For somebody who is supposed to enter clinical practice, who is supposed to enter CP1 and has not, we have arranged for some intensive individual tutoring for Praxis 2. And those would be those students who have the 120s and the 1-teens. So we have that first prong. The second prong is for both the core and the praxis to individual and small tutoring groups. We have contracted and contacted our academic support offices here at the university. We've arranged for both study skills sessions and for Khan Academy to be monitored there, and for praxis test prep materials to be shared through the academic support offices or system, and on both of our campuses. And we are getting reports of who comes and who does not come, so that when a student says, gee, I've tried and tried and tried, we will have documentation, and this was brought up earlier, of whether or not they actually went to get academic support. Okay. And the third prong is for those who, these are support workshops for praxis 2. The previous one are more support for the core, for our early candidates, freshmen and sophomores. And now we're looking at juniors and seniors, those going into student teaching. Okay. So we want to introduce basic test studying skills, test taking skills, time management skills, and all of that is coming with the blessing and the assistance of our academic support system. Then I want to just move on for a moment to the EdTPA. Now, the EdTPA has some interesting data, and all of us need to recognize that small steps really can indicate progress, can indicate some serious progress. So I'm going to show you, and again, I apologize, it's very small, but I wanted to put up a lot of data here for you. I'm going to compare the previous 6 months of data from EdTPA and the current, the most recent 6 months. And here's what we're learning. First of all, we're learning that the mean scores 6 months ago was a 46 on elementary. It's gone up to a 52.5. That's a 2-point jump on the mean scores. Is everything perfect? Absolutely not. Have we seen growth? Yes, we've seen tremendous growth on rubric 3, which is the knowledge of students went from a 3.1 to a 3.8. That's a big jump. We see growth on assessment on rubric 11 from a 2.5 to a 3.3 average mean. That is a big jump. From a 3.0 to a 3.5 on rubric 12, and that is providing feedback to students. And we acknowledge that we have a ways to go on rubric 13. That's the one of student use of feedback, but we moved from a 2.1, which is really quite low, to a 2.8, which is moving in the right direction. And for elementary candidates on rubric 20, from a 2.6 to a 3.3, that's analyzing individual students' work samples. Overall, we show some pretty decent growth on planning from a 13.0 to a 15.0, assessment from a 12.8 mean to a 15.5 mean, but we still have room for improvement on the instruction on those 5 rubrics. This second set of data compares Fairleigh Dickinson on the top to the state performance. Again, we're showing about 2 points above the state average. We're pleased with that, okay? And we saw we see that we're doing considerably better than the state on rubric 2, planning to support students' various needs. 3, rubric 3, our knowledge, our candidates' knowledge of their students. Rubric 11, way over in assessment, we're finding that's the analysis of the student learning over here. We're quite a bit above the state average on rubric gotta look for it, 14, where the state average is a 2.7 and we're at a 3.0, which really is a very 3.0 on a 5-point scale is a very reasonable target. And then individual work samples, that's that. Rubric 20 again, M at the top, the math, and we're nicely, solidly above the state mean. We're above the state mean by 1 point on the planning. We're above the state mean by a point, a little bit more than a point on the assessment. And we're a little bit below the state mean on instruction. So these are areas that we still have to look at, but we're using our data. And that data, that collective data, is really, really important. I will, before I go to my next slide, which is another piece of data for you, an area where we need some serious, to pump it up some more, I just want to tell you we're starting to get in, we've gotten in a slew of our 77 ed TPAs for this semester. We've gotten the reports. Every one of them has passed, and the scores are much higher overall than we've ever seen before. Now, I want to point out this rubric in instruction number 9. That is subject-specific pedagogy for the elementary literacy. One of the comments that our candidates have received over and over again is whether or not they're using literacy across the content areas. Are they using literacy skills and literacy vocabulary to make connections for reading and writing across the curriculum? Because it's very, very nice to be able to read a basal reader, but can our candidates apply those same skills in reading social studies material, in reading science material? And that's something that we have to go back and make sure that those skills are clear for our candidates. And that's one of the areas that we're looking to improve for the coming year. Just as a quick side story, many, many years ago, and I will venture to say probably about 35 or more years ago, I took over in the middle of a school year a 5th grade classroom, and I was a bit of a renegade at the time. I guess I still am. And I collected up the students' basal readers. For those of you who have been around the block more than once, it was an open court basal reader. Lovely back in its day, not particularly helpful at the time. And the school where I had taken a January position had no teacher's manuals. I collected up all the books, I put them on a shelf, and we did all of our literacy skills using the social studies and science and short stories that I brought in, good literature. And at the end of the school year, my students, I'm very pleased to say, tested anywhere from 2 to 5 years above grade level in the 5th grade. So it can be done.
Miriam,
Now, yeah.
Miriam, we're starting to get towards the end.
Okay, so I'm almost done with what I want to cover. Thank you, John. I just want to remind people that in going across content, they might still consider using this SQRRR. Survey the page, question what it's about, read the material, work in a small group or a class to discuss it, and go back and review what they read. Okay? So our successes have been that our seminar professors are much stricter with their trial runs. We also have found, and I'm just going to draw your attention to the last item, the last bullet on this slide, that we find that if a candidate has an incomplete or below a passing score, there's only a 50-50 chance that they're going to pass in the long run, mostly because they don't resubmit. They just give up. Okay. I've already discussed these quirks about the state alternate route. But the other thing I wanted to do about the alternate route is let you know that because they required 4 full semesters in the schools, we have, we're using the first 2 clinical internships for them to be very much like clinical experience, and the second 2 to be very much like CP1 and CP2, so that it puts alternate route candidates who are being thrown to the wolves on an equal footing. So I wanted to bring that up, and let's see. Oh, something that I don't know if you've seen with your students, your candidates, but our candidates have a lot of trouble when they don't perceive that they have an inclusion classroom. They don't know what a student with special needs means. And that includes the gifted. And so this is something that we have to embrace, we have to reinforce. And those are our students who we are forcing to say, there's always somebody who needs extra help in your classroom, even in an honors class or an AP class. And so with that, I'm opening it up to discussion. Okay?
Great, thank you, Miriam.
I apologize. I go on a little bit too long sometimes.
No, it's very well paced and and very nicely done. And I wonder if there are some questions out there. And you can type them in the chat box or you can just speak right up, depending. I did have a question. You know, the one question that comes to mind, Miriam, is those things you pointed out were concerning differentiation and special needs. Did you have thoughts about it? It seems to me that that's probably issues that go beyond just the candidates that you're looking at. You know, to me, it seems almost like a developmental thing that it takes a while before you really begin to distinguish individual students.
It takes quite a while. I would say that about 1/3 of our candidates are dual certification and they're getting special, they're also getting the learning disability certification. But I would also let you know that every one of our candidates, we don't let them out unless they've had a course, Introduction to Students with Disabilities. But I think we have to go back, and this goes back to the diversity, inclusion, equity issues. We have to go back into all of our pedagogy classes and make sure that every time somebody writes a lesson plan, they include provisions for students with special needs. Sometimes we specify what those special needs are. Sometimes we kind of leave it open-ended. We have to be more specific. So
Great.
that's a good point. There's some stuff in the chat. Do you want me to take it or do you want to moderate
Sure, I
it?
think mostly they're compliments. I'm not sure if I see a question.
Oh,
yet.
thank you. Yeah, thank you.
I did have
Yeah.
another question. I was noticed you do a lot of individual help for candidates as they go through your program. Do you find yourself working with the same if they have trouble with the core, is that pretty predictable that you'll be giving them help all the way through the program or
It's pretty predictable. It's pretty predictable. And one of the things that we did is we've met with the math department, and we have a second required math, not math pedagogy, math class that these candidates are required to take. Everybody's required to take it so that they really have that solid background. One of the issues that we found, for instance, on social studies is even though there are general education requirements, they're not required to take any history or any government unless they're a history or government major. So the problem is if they don't take that, then they have a lot of trouble with social studies. The same thing goes with science. If they took their science, and it's bifurcated. If they took their science as freshmen or sophomores and they don't take their praxis till the end of their senior year, they've forgotten everything, and particularly everything that they should have learned, which means they never really learned it. Okay. The flip side of that is that we have some students who don't take science until their very last semester because they've been putting it off, because they've been dreading it. And they can't pass either because they don't have the background. So it's a double-edged sword. And it doesn't mean they're not advised to take it early on and to get moving, but we do track that kind of issue.
Melissa, did you have a question? I noticed you flipped your camera on. No, okay. But there is a question in the chat box, Miriam. It says, with core Praxis 2 and EdTPA candidates, can easily go above $1,000 in testing assessment fees if anything needs to be repeated. Do you see any evidence that students with financial stress leave if any of the—
Oh, absolutely. 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 We see that they leave because sometimes what we really are seeing is that they're putting off taking their exams until they can garner the funds to pay for them. And we're doing what we can to help students, but it's not always enough. And we tell people in their freshman seminar with us, you are going to need X number of dollars to be able to get from point A to point B, and Y number of dollars to get from point B to point C. And we let them know right up front about all the costs. We actually do have a sheet that we have put together to hand out to them. And it scares some people. Our Madison campus students come from one socioeconomic grouping, and our TNEC students, our TNEC campus students, tend to come from lower socioeconomic status. They are more commuter rather than residential students. They are more students from the Latinx and the Black community, and all of that plays in. And we do track it very, very carefully.
Another question, are you using ACT and SAT in lieu of the core?
Yes. 1/3 of our candidates overall are exempted from taking the core.
Good.
Which we're real proud of that. It means we have a real nice applicant base.
Hey, I was wondering too, Miriam, you have a lot of individual help on the core, helping them pass the core, and you do these workshops. Have you, what about, how do you get the resources for that? Do you find that to be difficult, or is it built into your infrastructure, or?
There's a reason I have no fingernails. I scratch and scrape a lot. So the Academic Support Center at our university is open free of charge to all of our students. That's number one. Number two, we've tried something it's been moderately successful, and it's erratic, and that is, let's say, to take somebody who's a history major to do some one-on-one freebie tutoring to rack up brownie points with somebody who's not passing elementary social studies, and the same for math. a math major to tutor somebody, a science major to tutor somebody at the elementary level. Last year, we used some of our field supervisor funds to hire a praxis coach for students who did not pass the first time around to help guide them. It's tough. It's very, very difficult to find the funds. And we're trying to do it on a shoestring budget. We have purchased an institutional IXL membership that we use within our math pedagogy class to require those students to, pardon the expression, drill and kill. But we've also purchased additional social studies and science seats in IXL institutionally, so that students who need additional drill and kill in those areas can get in there. And I have been volunteered to help monitor those students. So.
Well, I bet that is similar to other programs. I know ours is similar. We provide as much support as we can, but it is, you have to be creative in finding those resources. And you got a lot of agreement on what your comments about the assessments and the EdTPA in terms of discouraging candidates.
And I already have candidates who have done their homework and they said, hey, we heard that the NTPA is going away. And I said, not so fast. Next year, it will still be here. By the way, there's this little clause at the bottom of the document that you have to read, or other commissioner approved assessment. So not so fast, children. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I don't know whether this, I've been very privileged to be able to track data. I love the math of it. That's my passion, is looking at charts and tables and data. But I will bet that whoever's doing your analysis may find similar issues. We're all working really hard to build our EdTPAs up based on past performance. And we think we found a way to at least improve. Not be perfect, but improve.
Another question in the chat box, Miriam. Are alternate route candidates struggling with EdTPA, or are they performing as the undergrads?
Out of my 6 candidates right now in their final semester, their 4th semester, one of my middle school math people who needed a 37 to pass got a 50. One of my, no kidding. One of my P3s who needed a 37 to pass got a 41. So that's quite respectable. And he's in Patterson, so that's really respectable. One of my ESL candidates right now, I won't even let her think about submitting right now because she still can't write a decent lesson plan. But most of my candidates are slowly picking it up. And I think the reason is because I took the time, I teach those seminars for them. I took the time to go task by task by task with the class and prompt by prompt to show them what's needed. Now get on it. So I think that's made a huge difference.
Very good. Are there any other questions? And thank you so much, Miriam. Thanks for giving a great presentation and answering the question. I think we've come about to the end of our time.
Yeah. Let me bring just one thing for alternate route candidates, which I found in the clinical 3, the third semester. I suggested to some of my candidates that maybe they do their videotaping this semester, they'll finish up in next December, and collect their student artifacts now and spend their summers when they have a little more time writing their commentaries. And then submit them either at the end of the summer or in the fall. And I think they were very much relieved to know that they would have some extra time to be able to do that. So that was just one other accommodation for people who are full-time teachers, full-time, no reprieve.
That's a great suggestion, Miriam. And clearly you're someone who really knows their candidates really well, what it takes to get through the program really well, and how to provide the best support you can, and give them the support they need to become an effective, successful teacher.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you for allowing me to drone on.
And thanks to everyone who came today. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming.
I appreciate it.